But now, all those confusions have gone down the drain. Do you know what the reason is? Symbiosis, my friend, a world beyond imagination. I registered for SNAP, and guess what? I just got 14 institutes under one canopy at 3 highly recommended locations for postgraduate programs and a wide variety of courses to choose from. At Symbiosis, I'm spoiled for choice with all incredible offers. The pride of being one of the privileged and successful students of Symbiosis. Symbiosis is located amidst the tranquil surroundings that drag your focus towards studies, like yogis on meditation. A world-class infrastructure providing nourishing space for learning, veteran mentorship and guidance. Number of value-added courses that allow me to concentrate on my academics and fear not about my job. Finally getting placed in one of the top-notch companies. I'm just not learning, I'm shaping my career with Symbiosis. Ha! It's time for you to join my journey to be a part of Symbiosis' legacy. See you soon at Symbiosis. I hope you remember, SNAP is your ticket to Symbiosis. Register today to be a part.
And also hit upon a well-rounded application. Just a little bit of background on the GMAT itself. These days the average GMAT of admitted students into top programs is measurably above 700, and you'd really like to be in any particular school within the middle 80% band of matriculating students and your GMAT score to have a reasonable chance of admission. But a strong overall application can overcome a weak GMAT, and case in point, if you look at Oringo.com, there's many examples of students listed who had low GMAT scores that were admitted into the top programs. So our main framework for today's discussion, in terms of what you can do with a low GMAT score, we have 3 proposed areas for candidates to address. The first is to frame your intellectual aptitude with other objective measures. The second is to frame your academic experience as more rigorous than that of your peer group. And the third are actions that the applicant you can take prior to submitting your application itself. So the first of the 3 areas in our framework in terms of talking about your intellectual aptitude with other objective measures, what you want to try to do here is provide context, typically as a percentile or rank within your peer group, and try to provide more recent results in your academic and professional history wherever possible. So the examples I'm going to talk about are in reverse chronological order for a potential career that might be relevant to you. So things that you might want to highlight would include topics such as, were you selected to train colleagues at work or in a client setting based on your mastery of a subject? If you recently completed the professional certification in your area, like the PE professional engineer, were you selected into your firm based largely on case interview process or problem-solving analysis, or was your firm particularly selective overall? Did you recently complete a professional exam where passing would allow you to practice in your region, for example, the bar exam? Other graduate school admission tests like the MCAT or the LSAT. Were you selected for merit-based scholarships, fellowships, or awards, or things like nominated as a top student by your faculty in school, or were you selected to complete research with a faculty member? College entrance exams, your IQ score, high school rank, and even if you skipped a grade, those are some of the things earlier on in your career that you can highlight. Okay, the second part of our framework is talking about your academic experience as more rigorous than that of your peer group. And these are really hardships or complexities that forced you to manage your time in a way that others in your peer group did not face. And again, quantify to the extent possible, and I'll talk a little bit more about that as we get into specifics. So for instance, in school, if you had an above average extracurricular load or significant work experience while in school, definitely provide the hours per week that you were involved, and really only stress this area significantly if you were way above average relative to your peer group. Examples specifically could include things like if you started a business venture, talk about the background there, the lessons learned, how you spawned the idea, etc. If you work full-time or part-time significantly, say 20 plus hours per week, and again, that's that much more impressive when fewer of your colleagues were in that same situation. Or military service, if you completed that while in school, that's a significant responsibility as well, in addition to school. While in school, if you had a more challenging academic setting, you can frame that in one of the following ways, if true. If you graduated early, first of all, talk about that and elaborate why. Usually it's because you were either trying to pay back loans faster or you were afforded a great professional opportunity. If you had a double major, which by definition meant that you had a heavier academic workload in terms of average number of credits per term, and if you had a major that was considered among the hardest at your school. Be careful with that last example though. Admission committees already take into account to an extent what your major was, and they know, for example, that engineering is a demanding major at most schools. When you describe these circumstances that we've talked about so far in the first two parts of our framework, you do not want to come off as though you're complaining about your situation. Instead, you want to try to frame it in a factual, sort of positive way, with the lesson of, hey, this is what I took away from this experience, and this is why it benefited me. So for example, if you had a lot of work experience in school, that might have improved your time management skills, for instance. So now in the first two parts of the framework, we've talked about a lot of ideas. How do you actually place these insights and implement them within your application itself? We believe that it's better to mention these inside your regular essays and CV instead of the optional essay for your application. The art, though, is to come off so that it's not forced into the story in your essays, but rather it's part more of a natural flow. Now, why do we say that you'd like to place them in your regular essays? Well, if you place it in the optional essay, it may appear that you're bringing excuses to the table when you don't want to actually do that. Mentioning the accomplishment that sort of belongs to the topic, so to speak, could actually have a bigger impact on the reader from the standpoint that it's easier for them to remember facts that are part of a coherent flow as opposed to something separate from the rest of the application. So how do you actually place these in the essay, whether it's in the regular or the optional essays? In the regular essays, if you're talking about, for example, your background as an applicant, you could say something to the effect of, my childhood shaped the way who I am today, and then somewhere in that essay talk about your high school distinction or SAT scores, if that was relevant and specific to you and your situation. Or if you're talking about your career progression, for example, you could say, one of the key decisions in my career in life was thinking about whether or not to pursue business or a law degree. My LSAT score placed me in the top 10% of students, but I ended up taking a job in the high-tech industry because of my interest in the company that offered me, for example. Within the optional essay, you don't want to just state whatever the contextual factors are. Instead, take a step back and give an introductory sentence like, I believe my GMAT does not accurately reflect my analytical skills, or I'd like to bring a few facts to the admission committee's attention that might help in evaluating these skills. And then you succinctly go and describe the facts. The longer, frankly, that it takes you to explain, the more that it may look like you're bringing excuses to the table. So try to do it in a succinct way. Okay, so the third part of our framework are actions that you as an applicant can take prior to actually submitting your application itself. Thus far we've talked about things that are basically descriptive of your history. You really can't change them in the first two parts of our discussion. So this third part is really about being strategic in your planning, in how you select schools, and how you complete a well thought out application that will hopefully differentiate you. So some specific examples would include things like the following. First, completing and excelling in getting at least a B, if not hopefully an A, in a business-related course. This is going to somewhat improve the impression of the admission committee on your analytical skills, but it's not totally going to address a low GMAT score. This is particularly relevant if your GMAT quant score is weak, or if you had an undergraduate major that was in a non-technical field or non-quantitative field like the humanities, for example. Obviously, make sure that your grade is available when you apply to business schools, and consider taking a class in statistics, finance, or accounting, because these are all classes that you would take in the first year of an MBA program. And finally, try to take the class to the extent that you can at an accredited and prestigious school, or the most prestigious school that you can afford and have access to where you live. Second concept would be to actually retake the GMAT test itself. You're going to only want to do this, though, if you think that you can improve your score significantly, for example, 30-40 points, or if you can get into the 700s, for example, if you were just going from 690 to 700, having that 7 in front of your score, in our prior research shows that has a positive effect. Look at your practice test history to see where your scores were at relative to what your previous actual GMAT scores were. Keep in mind that you might not actually improve very much, and you may actually do worse in subsequent tests. And finally, don't retake the GMAT if it's going to distract you from the rest of your applications if you're in the fall and into the application season. With your recommenders' stories and what they talk about in their application for you, in your resume, during your interviews, in your essays, all that combined, if you've got a low quant split on GMAT and or if you've got a non-technical background, think about telling a higher proportion of stories in those areas that I gave that are linked to you mastering a subject, or talking about your analytical skills and problem solving, or you getting up to speed on a complex issue. Conversely, if you've got a low verbal GMAT score, and or especially if you've got a technical background, think about talking about a higher proportion of stories that are linked to you and your leadership skills, and your communication, and your presentation, and your persuasion. And the idea here is that you really want to try to overcome the biases that admission committee members may already have about you, given your GMAT score and your academic and your work history. Another concept. Don't just research the school. Go beyond researching the school and develop relationships to prove interest, to prove that sincere interest. You can develop meaningful alumni and student relationships, and hopefully you'd want to try to do that in a way that is with people who have multiple similarities in terms of your background. That'll be easier to build rapport that way, both ways, because these people could become and can become champions for your advocacy, and they can help to some extent with your chances. Aringo's developed some expertise and guidelines for applicants and how to navigate this process. And as a separate point within this overall idea, mentioning these relationships and what you discussed in the communications within and inside your essays can help to convince schools that you do have a sincere interest in their program and help your chances. From a career goals standpoint in your essays and any application overall,